President for life. That's a big concern now that China's Xi Jinping has taken an unprecedented third term as head of the Communist Party.
Increased Uyghur and Christian persecution, heightened anti-U.S. alliances, and expanded military reach around the world are all expected to follow. Gary Lane has the story.
Members of the Chinese Communist Party applauded the accomplishments of Xi Jinping at their 20th Party Congress in Beijing and reaffirmed Xi's role as China's president.
It's clear that he is going to continue to lead the Chinese Communist Party forward. The things that people find terribly egregious about the Chinese Communist Party, in particular his leadership of the party, are going to continue and accelerate.
Air Force retired Brigadier General Robert Spalding is author of the new book, War Without Rules, China's Playbook for Global Domination. Spalding suggests Xi is likely to increase Christian and Uyghur persecution, promote anti-U.S. alliances, and expand China's military reach around the world. If the CCP is in this continual state of war without rules that you mentioned in your book, specifically then, where do you expect China to dominate militarily? On the sea, with an expanded navy, leaps forward in outer space, cyberspace, AI, where?
Well, I think all of the above. One of the challenges that they'll have now that the Biden administration has really gone after the chip industry, assisting them in elevating their chip technology, I think they're going to be hindered by that.
While Spalding believes Xi may go after Taiwan in the coming months, Jason Ho with Techlium, a Silicon Valley tech company, doesn't think China would risk a hot war with the United States. The Taiwanese American sees the CCP already capturing Taiwan through pro-communist relationships.
Taiwanese elite and the Chinese elite, actually, they are close. They have a very close family ties. And they know, and because the China and Taiwan, all those relationship is very sophisticated.
And despite tough talk from President Biden and other leaders, Ho says China has strong business ties in the states, such as Hollywood and pro sports like the NBA, along with major influence on social media.
We can criticize Russia, but we cannot talk about China. This is very well planned. They know how to use Taiwan. They know how to use duality to achieve their goals.
One big step to counter China, according to Spalding, came in August, when President Biden signed the CHIPS and Science Act. That law provides billions in subsidies and tax credits to help expand the U.S. semiconductor industry. That raised the ire of the CCP.
And when you look at it from the Chinese side, what they're saying is they've essentially decapitated China's ability to evolve their chip industry. So that's a good first start. Clearly not enough, because there's other things like pharmaceuticals and rare earth metals that we've got to get after. But if we keep this up, I think we're on a good path.
A necessary path, says Spalding, for slowing China's long march to global dominance. Gary Lane, CBN News.
I think world leaders have absolutely underestimated President Xi and what his absolute intent is, or the strength of his character. He is the son of the general of the Red Army who commanded those troops back in the 1940s, 1930s in northern China. After the revolution, after Chairman Mao won that war, he became vice chairman. Then in the early 1960s, when President Xi was just 10 years old, his father was purged. And he was put into jail, and all the privilege that he had and all the schooling he had went away, and he spent time in a cave. And from that, kept applying to the Communist Party, kept wanting to rejoin their ranks. He was prohibited because of his ties to his father, and then finally was admitted. And now has risen to the highest office in the land. And from that poverty, achieved amazing things academically. He's got a PhD in law and Marxist thought. He is an unbelievable character. Other world leaders have described his journey as similar to Nelson Mandela. Except on the other side, he values power, and he knows how to do it. Here's a quote from him. It's a quote from an interview back in 2000, but the Wall Street Journal published it this past year in December 2020. People who have little contact with power, who are far from it, always see these things as mysterious and novel. But what I see is not just the superficial things, the power, the flowers, the glory, the applause. I see the bullpens. What he's talking about there is the Red Guard detention houses that he was very familiar with. I see the bullpens and how people can blow hot and cold. I understand politics on a deeper level. With that understanding, he has consolidated power, and he has done something no other leader of China has done since Chairman Mao. He now has a third term. He's gotten rid of the restrictions on the length of term, and he is saying, I'm going to be president for life. The reason is he wants China to be the single world power by 2049, and he wants to put all of this architecture in place. So pay attention to what he's saying. One of the things he's saying is he's coming out with this historical nihilism. This is not just a Marxist view of history where you get to change history to fit a Marxist narrative. He's now actively enforcing any criticism of the party, any criticism of the past, any criticism of the Cultural Revolution, and he's a shining example of the excesses of it, the imprisonments. He is saying we cannot do that as a culture. He absolutely wipes it out. Then he has this other plan, and it's even labeled with his name. There's a whole cult of personality about this. His thought and the goal for 2049. He wants to have China be the world power. Now, who has more embassies right now than the United States? China does. Who is trying to build port facilities in countries around the world? China is. You know, why are they trying to do that? They want all the intelligence they can possibly get on the world economy. What better place than to own all the ports of the world? They are doing these things intentionally, and at the same time, they're doing it very intentionally, where they're trying to control semiconductors, they're trying to control pharmaceuticals. We learned during the pandemic, most of our medicines are made in China. And how could this happen on our watch, literally underneath our noses? They are doing this, and we in America, as we face an election, are we even paying attention to it? I think the answer quite clearly is no. And is that in our strategic interest? As you vote this year, I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but as you vote, could you please consider candidates that will say, America needs to rise to the top. We need to have these things in our, at least on our radar, and be paying attention to it, instead of focusing on these other things that really, in the long run, aren't going to matter. And by that long run, I just mean the next 25 years. So as we're divided as a nation, China is absolutely taking advantage of it. And President Xi is looking at it and going, what are these fools doing? The contrast couldn't be any clearer. So what do we do as a nation? Well, please let us come together and be one nation under God, indivisible.